Mini episode 1509 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Well, here's one of the things, too, and I'm glad you circled back around to that, Jake, because one of the things I want to talk about, and this is one of the hallmarks of the way that this company had been ever since losing the competition in WCW and ECW in 2001, for a period of time, the extreme continuity. And the funny thing is that in a lot of ways, you wouldn't compare this product with the old WWF, but if you look at that period of time, from 63 to 83, there would be a lot of continuity. You'd see a lot of the same guys cycling in, years apart. So this whole thing, like Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley, both being on top more than a decade after they'd broken in, or 15 years after that, that would be something you would have seen in the old WWF. We talked about this many years ago on the show of like John Cena in 06 against Van Dam and 11 against Punk. It was like the same thing. Like John Cena was in the same exact place 5 years apart of being the heel to a smart crowd because he was always the baby face that got booed. And that's the whole thing too, that one of the legacies of Cena, and I think there are a lot of legacies that, and I don't mean this as a shot at him personally, but if I'm looking at his record where it was harmful to the business, of where the lesson Vince drew from that was to disregard the crowd. Like if he sells it, disregard everything else. And he carried that over to Roman Reigns. And as you pointed out, Roman Reigns never even really got over until 2020 at SummerSlam when he went heel and has gotten over in this persona here now. So staleness of stuff over a period of time. I'm not saying that you won't see any continuity from those 20 years or so going forward here. I'm not saying you'll never see any of that again, but the tendencies of continuity, staleness, staying with things that aren't working, you're going to be seeing that get greatly diminished over the next several years as they get more of this common sense direction there with the company.
One can only hope that the direction they take. The only thing we really go based on was, Triple H's run at NXT, and it showed that he had a penchant for listening to the audience, what the audience wanted, and going in that direction. I never understood the 2000, basically starting around like 2006 with John Cena, like you mentioned, the I'm going to do this in spite of you mentality from Vince McMahon.
Right.
And, we always had the line of like, he sells merchandise to the little kids. Okay, great. But still, I mean, I saw little kids wearing Steve Austin shirts back in the 90s.
Yeah.
They're children. They're gonna listen. They're gonna like, and they're gonna go for whatever is there.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like in the 80s, it was Hulk Hogan. I mean, I cannot tell you how many people that I talked to that were wrestling fans as a kid who absolutely, to this day, loved the Ultimate Warrior, haven't watched wrestling since then.
Yeah.
They just and he was hot garbage, but that's what you were fed. So we've all heard the company, the official tone was, John Cena moves so much merchandise, so we're never going to see that heel turn. I just think it was a personal message from Vince McMahon to the audience of basically F you. I'm going to give, which is irony there, with John Cena's F you move. I think it was a message from Vince of like, F you, I'm going to do my, the updated version of the Hulk Hogan babyface, and cause that's what made me money, and I'm just going to keep going with it. And he was under the impression of, you're going to keep watching anyway, no matter what. And granted, the diehards were like that, but to the long-term damage that has done to the product itself, I mean, that's evident by the lack of people who are watching today.
Yes.
And then trying it even further, with Roman Reigns, it was even worse. With Cena, I felt like by the end of it, everybody was in on the joke. Like, so
Right.
it was like let's go Cena sucks. And if you watch the crowds during that time, I want to say probably like 2013, 2014, Cena.
Yeah.
Everybody was chanting both things.
Yes, true. And
to an extent, to the point where even when it comes back now, Cena's street, he comes out and you don't hear as much of the Cena sucks chant, but that's only because he's not on TV. If he's on TV regularly, once you hit that crowd, you get the New York City would do something like that. But it became more a point where like, okay, we're all in, like, we get it, we're in on the joke of what we're doing. With Roman, it was no, like just no, we're not doing this again. You're not getting what you want this time. Where they were left with no other choice, and I was actually petrified that Drew McIntyre was going to fall under the same, fall victim to the same circumstances of that Vince McMahon style babyface booking, where basically he snips your balls off, and everything that makes you great goes away, and that happened. I mean, Drew was unfortunately in the long, because of the whole COVID era and shut down, his moment got taken from him. As an unfortunate side effect, so we'll never know what it would have been like seeing him. The star should have been made when he beat Brock Lesnar at that WrestleMania, but unfortunately the real world had different plans. Maybe Triple H rights a wrong at Clash at the Castle, because going back to our comment about Bill Watts, was one of the first things he did was get the championship onto the guy he wanted. Now, granted, it was, third, fourth, fifth tier babyface that Watts did it as. I could very much see this being Triple H righting that wrong, giving McIntyre that star-making win, and what better place to do it than in his home country, well, it's not home country, but in the UK, where it's right around, his people, close enough, close enough, right in the UK, and that place, and especially seeing one of their own be the one to topple the unstoppable. Oh, he's a made man. He comes back as an absolutely made man, and that's going to be the interesting thing to see from a creative perspective, if that's the way they're going to go, or if it's, do they stay with the vision of Vince McMahon of just keeping on, because let's face facts, the world champion for pretty much the past 7 years has been a part-timer.
Yes.
With the exception of the Drew run and Lashley here and there, but like for the most part, you had Brock, you had Roman, Cena would come in with the belt. It's more favorable to the part-timer having that run, and I just would like to think that as you mentioned earlier, as these part-timers start to age out and new ones take that spot that or fill the voids that were taking place. Hopefully we get a nice little change in creative direction and something like this. Get rid of a Kevin Dunn and put a new man on the top of the totem pole.
Right, and there's a lot to unpack there. As far as the part-timers go, they'll never be as dependent on, say, a Goldberg or an Undertaker or whatever. I mean, Roman, Cena, whatever, they'll be the things that you add to the bigger cards, but they're not going to be the things of like, oh, we're booking this guy and depending on this to draw us this money. Now, Roman, had it still been Vince in there, they would have left the belt on him at the next pay-per-view, because you and I have said this for years. You don't need a belt to do Roman and Rock. It's going to be one of the biggest matches ever anyways. It doesn't need the belt. But Vince wouldn't have believed that.
The belt, the quote-unquote belt, the title of the line is the tribal chief. The head of the table.
Yeah.
That's your story.
Yeah.
Done.
And that's, that's the whole thing. And the funny thing is, I mean, to tie it to what we're talking about here, it's sort of like today's version of the Being John Cena title, which is what he had in 2012 when CM Punk had the actual title, which, I always felt like for Cena, one of the turning points was 2015, the U.S. Open Challenge, where he's going out there and he's sort of doing this PWG cosplay on Monday nights. And that seemed to get people more into it, when he's doing the matches with Kevin Owens and these other guys and whatever. And I mean, Springboard Stunner really sucked as far as his execution, but he tried. He was trying to do new stuff. He was putting effort into it, and people seemed to respond to that. So I felt like that was a little bit of a turning point for him. But as far as the part-timers of yore, Goldberg is probably just about done. Shane O'Mac, strange to say, he might have a better chance of coming back under Triple H than he did Vince, but it still doesn't seem like that great of a chance. Triple H is gone for good because of his heart issue. So, wisely, he's doing the right thing there. The Austin thing seems to be a one-time shot. So, you could have Roman, you could have Cena, you could have some of these guys, in that spot, doing those things here. But I think the whole thing of putting the belt on a part-timer, that is going to be something that they're going to be getting away from. That's going to be one of the hallmarks of things going forward. And it's a little bit of, I don't want to belabor the point that I'm going to make because, I don't want to go too far in the direction of talking about this subject, but it is a little bit of an elephant in the room if you and I are talking about this here. You and I, having first started talking wrestling on the air as the sort of Beatles of Sunday Night Submission back in the day. So I'm going to make this point as obliquely as I can. And that is, as people know, there are smart minds that exist in that company. And there are smart minds that can do more than they've had a chance to do. You go back to, for example, the glory days of NXT, or I might randomly throw out the middle of the year 2013 on SmackDown, or the end of the year 2016 on SmackDown, if you're picking up what I'm putting down, and I think you are. So there are smart people that exist in that company, and some of those smart people have a good relationship with Triple H and should be empowered to do more with Triple H than they did Vince. I hope I wasn't too oblique in those points there. I don't think I was.
No, not at all. Yeah, you were not. It was very subtle, very subtle what you were referencing there. On a completely unrelated note, have you talked to Kyle Ross lately?
You're thinking of someone else from that particular thing. By the way, I hasten to say.
Yeah. And you know what? I wish Mike Flick all the best under the new Triple H regime.
Kyle is doing some great stuff out there as always. And as far as anyone else that might have been attached to it, I'm going to say this right here and now, and that I can only speculate. Basically, listen, I do Twitter searches and stuff like that. Again, we have a friend that's there. We're joking about this. I don't get any kind of dirt. I know you don't get any kind of dirt. All I know is what I read on Twitter, so to speak here. But there's an awful lot of stuff on Twitter about the inner workings, Jake Digman. A lot of it basically rings true. So as far as the way that people are empowered or not empowered in that company, again, you turn loose the brightest minds, and that's going to be another turbocharge to the product as well. People who get the most out of what's there. I mean, go back to Heath Slater, getting over Heath Slater. I got kids, okay? You got people that have a track record of getting some very unlikely people over in that company, Jake Digman.
It goes back to the whole looking at the future, and I think our buddy is a very good asset to use in that situation. It was very influential in the forming and shaping of a lot of these guys' careers under the old days of NXT. Which, by the way, and I said this to him. I said, it reminded me of at that time. I'm like, it reminded me of a cross between a super indie and like Memphis,
right?
Some sort of like a small time studio wrestling. I absolutely love that, and take advantage of that. And also the advantage of that being too is this is something that I don't know if I can say this, but I'm going to say it so
okay.
I don't get him in trouble. Is everybody in a conversation that we had?
Yeah.
We were talking, and somebody had something about like, oh my God, let these guys do their own. Stop scripting everybody. Everybody's like, do their own promos. Stop doing scripted promos. And a birdie, I'll just say this, a little birdie said to me, unfortunately, a lot of these people came up under these scripted promos. That's how they came through the system. They wouldn't know how to do it if it wasn't scripted for them.
Yeah.
They're not that creative, so they don't know what to do. And I bring this up. Thankfully, Seth's little birdie is still available near the nest that can also help cultivate these people into knowing their cadence and knowing their styles and help them being like, hey, here's a little bit of a nugget. Now let it grow and make it and mold it and shape it into your own as to who this character is as part of you, as opposed to what said person over here, aka Vince McMahon, is telling you what your character is.
Sure.
Vince didn't tell Steve Austin what his character was. Contrary to what Bro will tell you, not being Riddle, contrary to what Russo would say in interviews of writing for all these guys, No, and by the way, I'm going to do a little plug, I guess. We're both corny marks.
Yeah.
He recently did an episode where he read off of a bunch of Russo's pitch meeting stuff, suggestions, and if you haven't heard it yet, seek it out. It is absolutely hysterical, ridiculous. I'm like, oh yeah, that guy definitely, like, you know, at that time, yeah, he was totally ready for The Rock. Okay,
Yeah.
you know, but. This little birdie could very easily be, you know, speaking of The Rock, he could be the you know, a star of today. Was it Gewirtz? Yeah, Brian Gewirtz, who was like first writer for Dwayne Johnson.
Right.
You know, with a lot of these guys that he helped cultivate, he could, you know, help perhaps let their characters grow and become extensions of themselves as their personas. And everybody knows once it becomes an extension of yourself and a persona, that's how you create a star.
Right.
Because the person's being comfortable on TV, they're being who they are, not someone they're told to be.
Right.
So we shall see.
And I felt like NXT, the era when so many of these guys came out of there, that I always, those glory days of it, about 2013 or so to 2016, that whole wave of guys there. The aforementioned genius that had the pencil at the time, it was one of these things where, you know, you talked about the influences you saw. I think I would say a little bit of Mid-Atlantic, a little bit of classic Mid-South in there as well. Good foundational, fundamental wrestling booking and how you go through these things and making sense out of stuff. And all these things we keep coming back to, make sense out of things, logic, let these guys shine in the ring. You know, just, you know, again, emphasize, you know, the wrestling part of the sports entertainment. And again, because, you know, you still have, for as many green guys as they're bringing into NXT, and hopefully that is a tendency that's going to reverse itself over a period of time. But again, the work rate that you have on both sides, and again, you know, and in the women's level, it's never been higher. The work rate on the women's side, and a bunch of people who can potentially really be big stars, some of whom already are. Again, stop getting in your own way. Stop stepping on your own Johnson. That's so much of what Vince was doing. That's so much of what made the product maddening the last couple of years. And people like me and you that would watch it increasingly sparsely, that was the reason why. So it's one of these things where, again, they're slowly ramping up the improvements. They're slowly kind of making it more of compelling programming to watch, making the most of their time and everything like that. And again, I think when we get several months down the road, it's going to be one of these things where the day-to-day changes may not be as obvious. Kevin Dunn would be an obvious and overdue change. But outside of that, I think you would agree with me, right, that these changes are going to be more subtle over a period of time. But this could be a thing where, you know, God willing, we get to, you know, Royal Rumble season, and we'll be like, oh my gosh, this is so much better than it was last summer.
Don't insult your audience and don't treat them like they're stupid.
Yes.
And Vince McMahon treated the audience like they're stupid.
Right.
Like, constantly. It was almost to the point where he was making fun of you for being a fan of this.
Right.
Like, why would you watch this?
Right.
They're going to come back? Okay, I'm going to make fun of you again.
Right.
And it's like over and over again. And, you know, I agree that it has to be subtle, different changes. You know, we talked about a couple of things that could, you know, they could do. You can't do everything all at once, or then it ends up like, you know, WCW in the 90s, in the late 80s or the 90s,
right,
where every time a new regime comes in, everything just, you turn it all upside down,
right,
as you said, with the great analogy of Bill Watts, just exposes everything, which that, and in 2022, that quote-unquote exposing the business isn't really a big issue.
Right.
But if you come in and you just say, okay, if you come in and say all this stuff changes all at once, it tells the audience you were stupid for watching. You wasted your time
right,
when you were watching before.
Right.
Now, a couple little, you know, start off, you know, mention the suggestion of Drew McIntyre winning the title, putting it on a full-time competitor. Here's number two that could go out there, you know, change the set designs that they have. And so they're just like blandless, freaking HDC, whatever their entrance ways. They have no distinguished ability to any of them, really. They all look exactly the same to me. Right. I know one's blue and one's red. Something like that, a slow, but you can't do it again. You can't do it all at once. Change, you know, something like that. And then over time, as these different things that are changing, you know, new people on top, a champion on the show every week, dare I say this, and the brand extension. anyway, or do a thing where you either end it or do it right. And I have to give credit where credit is due. We haven't even touched on this yet. The whole hyping up the secondary titles.
Right.
Number one, they ran the hype videos to try to make the United States and the Intercontinental Championships have relevance. That's more than Vince McMahon out of the Vince McMahon regime did for years.
Right. I agree. I totally agree with that. It's long overdue. And I will say that, again, I don't have a problem with making the titles exclusive to the two shows. But as far as, the world champion, the tag team champions, they should be going back and forth. I completely believe that. I would unify the women's belts, although I might hold off on that until WrestleMania, maybe save it, for that point in time, make it kind of a landmark kind of a deal there. But I don't mind the idea of having a lot of the wrestlers be exclusive to one show or the other, but you do have to have exceptions to that. And again, the world champions should be. This is one of these things where the networks, and this goes to them being money marks again, like they don't even know what's in their own best interest, because this is the thing, we've talked about this on the show before, that during the height of the Attitude Era, okay, nobody was exclusive to Raw or SmackDown. Do you think USA and whoever the heck the other one was, if it was UPN, VPN, whatever the hell it was, do you think they cared?
My network TV.
Yeah. Do you think they gave a rat's ass that Stone Cold The Rock, Triple H, The Undertaker weren't exclusive to them? Hell no, because the pie was bigger. Grow the pie together. The pie, don't be marks fighting over 50 cents on the sidewalk when you could turn that into a $5 bill figuratively. You know what I'm saying? You have to look at the bigger picture here. And what you want to have, what's more important than having exclusive stars, quote unquote, from a product where nobody is really stars and it's a lukewarm product, to you're sharing stars, but they're big stars and it's a hot product. I mean, that's one of the most basic precepts out there in business. And it's so funny that, like, the networks would understand this if it wasn't pro wrestling. There's something about pro wrestling, Jake Digman, where when people start dealing with it, they throw the rest of their whole insights of the rest of the world out of this, and they just treat it as this oddity, like it's from Mars, and we have to apply all these kind of things to it, looking at it like that. No, you look at it like you would any other kind of product, of like, what are they doing to maximize their creativity? What are they doing to try to get new stars over? It's the same kind of thing that you would be looking at if it were any other form of entertainment. But for whatever reason, these networks like get hypnotized into thinking it's something completely different. And maybe it's the old Carney thing existing over 100 years, from when it first started, right? Of like, oh, it's this completely alien thing.
Vince McMahon is the one feeding them this line of like, well, you need this star. It'll make your show bigger because, this star will be exclusive to your show.
I believe
everyone will want to watch that.
Yes.
And if everyone's going to watch for your network for this guy, I don't think the network themselves would go, if Vince were to walk in and said, hey, we're not doing a brand extension, we're going to have all of our stars on here, all of our stars on there, whatever the Carney salesman pitched to them is what they're going to believe. And at the end of the day, the only thing that's going to matter is the ratings and the advertisements. And if the ratings go up, that's all they care about. They don't care, it's a business. At the end of the day, television is a business. They care about the bottom line. They don't care about, this exclusivity to this and exclusivity to that. And to circle back to your point of having like exclusive stars here, an exclusive star there, and little pieces of the pie, you need stars, not exclusive stars. You need just stars. And they don't have any stars.
Yeah.
They don't have any. They have it's very, I'm not going to say true wrestling fans know who Drew McIntyre is. Average person walking down the street, they don't know who Drew McIntyre is.
Right.
They might know who Roman Reigns is, and that's even a stretch. If you're to ask the average person, hey, name a professional wrestler, they're going to tell you The Rock. They're going to tell you Steve Austin. Maybe John Cena. Heck, even Hulk Hogan. They haven't done a thing where they've created the and it's in spite of themselves.
Right.
Because whenever the opportunity comes up to create a star, it's always been, and going again, one of Vince McMahon's insecurities, which hopefully these are be in the days of yore sooner than later of the fear of somebody becoming bigger than the company and then they leave it.
Right. Well, and what's funny about that is John Cena didn't get to be a name known by the real mainstream until it was really funny when he did the 2-year program with The Rock, and The Rock, quote unquote, passed the torch to him in 2013. That was about the 11:55 p.m. mark of John Cena being a full-timer, wasn't it? So.
Oh, yeah. That was. Hindsight's funny on that view. He's like, you're never here, right? Like, you had a pretty good idea. You make how much money out there doing this?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go do what he's doing.
Yeah. And
I guess you could say that's the John Cena heel turn.
I guess so. And like that's when Cena really got to be mainstream. It's when the company became secondary to his other pursuits, which it was a slow movement from that for about 2 years or so. But I mean, that WrestleMania, think about it. That's the last one that he headlined in a title match in 2013. And none of us would have believed that at the time. By the next year, he's working with Bray Wyatt. By the year after, he's working with Rusev, et cetera, et cetera. So the trajectory was becoming established there. And that's the thing is, I believe, and I think you kind of hit on a point that I've been making for a period of time now, Jake Digman, me being the cynical guy that I am, I think Vince was playing divide and conquer with the networks. I think he was pitting them against each other because somehow or another, I guess he thought he'd come out on top if they were fighting over guys for exclusivity. If that's the case, once again, all you got to do is stop doing that, be honest with the networks, and convince them that, like, look, guys moving back and forth, it can be a good thing if they're promoted in the right way. We're trying to promote them in the right way. What you want are bigger stars from a hotter product. And that's something that you can only basically do if they're all sort of on the same roster here, because they don't have enough star power to do a brand split. They really don't. I do trust that under Triple H it would be better enforced. You wouldn't have the sloppy crossovers, the soft, end of the brand split. As they did in like 2011 to 2013, which was just disastrous. You wouldn't have that. You'd have a real brand split under Triple H if they decided to do it that way. But I don't think their star power is deep enough, and I don't think signing these guys back one by one is going to be enough to do it. You have to have a product here where, because otherwise you're taking guys that are mid-card guys, you're having to push them up to upper mid-card when the audience might not be accepting them as such. You've basically got to take a good, honest look at who your pool of potential main eventers are, upper mid-carders, and then you kind of work down from there. And if you do it honestly, if you look at it the right way, it's going to tell you don't have a deep enough roster of talent that's over or going to get over anytime soon to do 2 separate sub-promotions.
Lest we forget, why was the brand extension implemented in the first place?
It was because allegedly, in the aftermath of WCW, we got all this star power and not enough time to be able to showcase them all. And it's one of these things where, but here's the thing. If it wasn't for the fact that they were addicted to the quarter-hour ratings and wanting to always put the guys they had in the biggest spots, then it would be a thing where, if you're willing to take some time and build up the guys that you have, but they were allergic to the notion that the boom was over, which, by the way, the boom was over, and then Stone Cold leaves, The Rock turns into a part-timer, and you're in a situation where by like 04, 05, it really was a matter of like, remind me again why we're doing this, because the whole notion that you had too big of a roster of guys that were over was just patently ridiculous. You barely had enough for one even then.
Not even that. Even beyond that, the public line that WWE put out there was they bought up their competition, so now their competition was in-house amongst each other.
Yeah.
What we have now, there's actual competition.
Yes.
To the point where it's like, this isn't a simulated competition. There is an actual competition
yes.
that is on network television that has a very strong, loyal fan base.
And a boatload of talent. A boatload of talent.
And a boatload of talent that's there. And here I said, the only thing right now that has been really, and they're still growing. AEW is less than 3 years old.
Right.
Think about this. When, the WWF super indie fed.
Right.
And it's combining all of these different elements, including the minds that work under Triple H.
Right.
So it's the whole notion of exclusivity for WWE. Now, man, you guys got to take, and I really hope in the direction they take moving forward is they got to recognize this is your real competition. If these guys are paying this much money to these guys, and if Tony Khan and AEW is paying a set amount of money to guys out there, it means, and they're put on shows, and WWE has to see, like how many of the maybe they'll get 1 million viewers, but a strong percentage of those people buy their stuff.
Yeah.
They buy those. That's loyalty. That's brand loyalty. That's what WWE needs to cultivate, and then you can get something to the akin of that. And it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time to get to it. But one of the things they can start with is recognizing that, okay, we do not have enough in-house. We don't need to do this fake competition amongst our two, let's face it, they're not brands or television shows.
Right.
Even our two television shows, because we have an actual television show over there that's doing actual things. So if you got, and they're all competing for the same ticket dollar. WWE was just in town on Monday. AEW is coming to town next week.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Right.
So August 26th, by the way, for whenever you listen to this in the future. The
Right.
date I'm referencing on this.
Yes.
But yeah, so like that's two nationally touring professional wrestling companies competing for entertainment dollar right now with inflation and everything else soaring through the roof to get people, to come out to see their shows. But granted, it goes back to the I do believe the lockdown proved that they can have nobody come out to their shows and apparently still make record profit.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, if you have nobody watching these shows, you're not going to get the renewal when the money comes up from the television contracts, as we mentioned before.
Well, yeah.
So it's time that, there is actual competition, and they are out there competing for the entertainment dollar. And the days of pretending that the WWE has a monopoly over all the professional wrestling business, especially in this country, it's not true anymore. So, I mean, it's all a matter, and even with the other options too, like the super indie feds and put on like different shows. They had that, the Ric Flair's last match. Say what you want about it, it drew a house.
Yeah.
There's other options underneath this, and it'll be interesting to see what direction, going forward and moving ahead for us into the future that the Triple H regime and Stephanie McMahon, the McMahon-Helmsley era, what they do with things. I agree with you. I think it's time to get back to basics and focus on what made them good from the first place. The 1980s WWF had a humongous roster. They didn't need a brand extension.
Well, yeah.
The late 90s had a fairly large roster, not as large as it would get in 2002, but the whole, we need to simulate a competition. No, you don't need that simulation, buddy. It's there. It's real. Turn on TNT on Wednesday nights. There's a real, actual competition.
Yep.
Coincidentally, on the same exact network, I'm sorry, TBS now. Back on TBS. What it was old is new again.
Yes. TBS and TNT. Many excellent points there. By the way, with good old Carney Conrad there, with the sock puppet that he had of Jim Crockett Promotions. What's next? Don Kernoodle's last match? I mean, are they just going to work their way down the list here of guys who had been there at some point? And, the last match for, I was going to make the Buzz Tyler joke, but then unfortunately, I guess he passed away. So I have to look guys up to make sure they're still alive before I make that joke. But, as far as it goes with the competition.
I mean, but okay. How many ECW reunion shows did we get in the 2000s?
Okay.
TNA milked that, WWE milked that, Extreme Rising, Extreme Revolution, freaking CZW.
Yeah, no.
It's a thing,
Yeah.
And as far as what you call Carney Conrad goes,
yeah.
at least it was something we hadn't seen before.
Well, that's true.
It shocks me. It absolutely shocks me still that the WWE, not really, because, they view WCW as like the second tier citizens. ECW is kind of like, they kind of had, it was like, they kind of had a little love for her.
Right.
It was like, you're not real competition. But WCW, it's like when they had all the talent there, they could have done a WCW show.
Yeah.
It was, everybody, like, the revisionist history likes to say, oh, WCW is terrible and awful, and look at all the bad stuff that, it sucked, and that's why Vince kicked their butt. And you're like, yes and no, but I mean, there were certain things, and I mean, beyond the NWO and Goldberg, like,
Right.
we were all, huge Jim Crockett promotion fans.
Oh, yeah.
The Horsemen back in the day, early runs of Sting, Magnum TA, that stuff. That's put on by that fan base with a lot of nostalgia. So
Right.
I'm amazed no one really had done it until now.
Right.
Did the whole Jim Crockett promotion that it took, realistically, that it took this long.
Yeah.
I guess maybe Sting's last match when he gets bored will be on there when his AEW run is over, but he's having too much fun.
Well, I think I don't see Tony Khan letting that happen outside of the AEW auspices, but to bring this around here all the way around, I just want to say in terms of AEW and what you said about competition, what I think we need to do before we wrap this thing is to disabuse that notion from all the bad faith pro-Vince trolls out there who were gloating when Triple H had been seemingly demoted even before his heart issues here. Oh, he lost to AEW. Oh, people don't want to see that kind of stuff. They want Vince's sports entertainment. Here's what it was. And I say this as somebody who, as I said to you, in the early days of the Wednesday Night War, I was channel surfing. But it was a thing where AEW was so great that it was a thing of like, you could watch on the one hand a thing where it's unrestrained pro wrestling versus on the other channel, it's Triple H is trying to do as much pro wrestling as he can get away with under the WWE banner. And that was the thing too, was that, and again, even early on, I think AEW probably had a deeper roster than NXT as far as guys that you would want to watch. Because we talk about the top stars of that era, of Undisputed Era, Keith Lee, et cetera, but that would morph into Karrion Kross, who had kind of an underwhelming time on top of some of the other things over a period of time here with NXT. So it was a thing of like, it was their best product creatively. It was WWE's best product by a country mile, but it was just a thing where it wasn't going to be able to compete with AEW, which was just bringing the pure pro wrestling goodness right off the bat, as we've talked about, sort of a mixture of Jim Crockett Promotions, Mid-South, a little bit of ECW, a little bit of Lucha Libre. I mean, it's a buffet, basically. It's all these things here, and that's where, again, WWE, I think Triple H is going to learn from that over a period of time, because for Vince, it's always been, he's been at his happiest when it's been a constant stream of gym dummies with muscles and everything like that, and everybody goes and works the same style. I think Triple H gets that at its best, it's a buffet. It's what AEW is bringing us, a smorgasbord, whatever the hell you want to call it. Not everything is the same as everything else. And I think the diversity as far as the type of performers, styles of matches, types of characters, we will continue to see this evolve over a period of time. We're already seeing it, the Karrion Kross getting the right presentation for his character. You can count me among the people where, I'm not as hyped for the guy as a potential main eventer as some people are. In terms of, on the main roster, I don't think he stands out as much in terms of his size. I've never been enamored with him as a great worker, although I think he's a good worker. But the character work, having Scarlett by his side, all that stuff is top notch, and I'm willing to keep an open mind on him. But that's the whole thing, and the pragmatism of going with what works. Triple H clearly has a pragmatic streak about him. Vince, increasingly in his later years, didn't. I don't think he'd really shown one going back to the Attitude Era. The Attitude Era is the one time when he was just like, okay, screw it, I'm going to go with what works. And then they got through that period of time, and it was just back to, I'm going to do it my way again. And then, for, like I said, for as much as you said before about Cena being like Hogan in presentation, I've always said Bob Backlund. Hustle, loyalty, and respect. You could have heard that coming out of his pie hole in 1979, right? So Vince has got his own way of doing things here. Triple H is pragmatic. He listens to people. He works with people. They have some great minds there. Again, long story short, I don't expect to love it as much as I love AEW anytime soon. But just the fact that we could even be talking about loving the product again to any kind of degree is just the kind of optimism that's only made possible by Vince being voiced by his own petard. Thank God.
I genuinely hope there comes a day where you don't dread turning it on. Where you're like, hey, we're going in like, well, this is going to be terrible. Maybe have a little bit of fun.
I'm past that point already. I mean, just look, even the early shows, I was just kind of, it was just a little bit of a curiosity factor of like, how's it going to be different? But as soon as Triple H was put in charge of creative, like I said, I didn't want to get over my skis. I didn't want to be like, oh my God, I wasn't going to do that. I'm protecting myself on this. And besides, I have AEW to fill that void in my pro wrestling fandom. So I don't need it to be as great as it used to be. But I think over a period of time, and again, it's still the WWE system that Vince built. And as I said before, merch is still going to dictate some of what happens with the guys and girls getting pushed. There are still going to be some factors involved in this that we might not like as much. Because in AEW, again, Orange Cassidy, right? He's one of the biggest. He is at minimum a couple of years away from getting pushed as a world champion, if he ever does get to that point. Tony Khan, who is hyper-focused on metrics, he's not sitting there going, oh, how many Cassidy t-shirts will we sell as champion? And a certain amount of that is baked into the WWE. So there are some going to mitigate against it being as great as AEW. But talk about that like it might actually happen one day, no matter how remote the possibility. I'll take what I can get after 20 years of Vince beating down my WWE fandom.
I'll take that. And speaking of kind of tying all this together, something you just mentioned there, hopefully is moving forward with the Triple H under the Triple H idea for creative vision. Hopefully, long gone are the days of where a star gets punished for getting themselves over.
Yes.
Because for far too long under Vince McMahon, somebody you mentioning, I think it was Rusev, made me think of that.
Yeah.
Like, how the dude gets himself over. The crowd. Oh, you talk about merch moving. That dude was moving merch.
Yeah.
People were on board with it. They wanted it. But it wasn't what Vince wanted. It was like, how dare you not want what I want?
Yeah.
And everybody, hopefully the days of where this is a role and a slot that's filled is gone. Where it's like, okay, this is the Roman Reigns slot. No one else can enter it.
Yep.
It's like that's not wrestling. That's Vince McMahon sports entertainment ideas. And the one thing, if you looked at with NXT, and granted, it was because of the product of what it was constantly changing. But there wasn't that one guy at the top, or even that one style at the top.
Yeah.
When you have an NXT champion, you go from a Seth Rollins to a Big E. Those are two totally different styles and totally different presentations. To an Andrade, I think that Drew McIntyre was the champion for like 45 seconds in NXT.
Yes.
Stuff like that too. Basically it was like the big name super indie guy that came in, but it always like it was constantly changing to whatever the new flavor was, and it gave everybody a chance to get over in that aspect. And I said it was a potpourri of different styles and different styles that came in for one giant melting pot, and I'm really excited. With the limited names that are still there,
yeah.
But that that Hunter has access to work with, that they can do something with. What we do with Kevin Owens, we've beaten McIntyre's name to death on this one, but there's several other guys. I mean, Big E, that are still floating around. Sami Zayn, who's done fantastic work on SmackDown.
Ricochet.
Let's go back to the King of Strong style. As an attraction. How about a Bobby Roode?
Right.
So many other names that have come through that just been laundering as a result.
Right.
Could be for some exciting times, and you can't go make them all world beaters overnight, but at the same time, you do something. And another name for the future, Austin Theory.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, Vince is gone. He's going to be done. He ain't going to be done. I don't think he's going to get the rocket push that was originally intended for him. And, dare I say, I wouldn't be surprised if he loses that Money in the Bank contract, but that's neither here nor there. That's for another podcast.
There are so many different possibilities right now. It just seems like all things are possible because you don't have Vince's closed mind in here. And, maybe this is the best note to leave it on is what you said about Rusev. If a guy is getting himself over and you're so pissed about it that it seems like you want to put an electroshock on his gonads so he can't say Rusev Day anymore. If that's your attitude towards it, to where you hate money if it's not an idea you came up with, then again, your time has come and gone. And again, I mean, it's funny that again, the reasons for why it happened, but again, this thing because I'm just is that this is basically that when it was coming out early on of like, oh, and then he gave this one female employee to Laurinaitis or whatever. Like, okay, I just have to say this for the record, not cool. Okay, not cool. The whole thing that came out on why these NDAs existed. All right, this is stuff where again, Vince didn't ever catching up with him. Vince thought he could get away with stuff forever, but it's the 15-year itch, Jake Digman. I don't know what he was up to in 1977, but 92 was the steroids issue, the big scandal with Hogan. 07 was the Benoit thing, and now 22. It's long enough till 2037. It's not going to be a good year for him, bro.
That's probably when he dies.
It might be. If you got a Vince McMahon death pool, load up on 2037. So
taking it right now, 2037.
Yes.
Kicks the bucket.
Well, on that very classy note, we'll bring it around, and again, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure, buddy.
Thanks, pal. Appreciate it, and thank you, everybody, for joining us for these mini episodes of the FDH Lounge.